Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys know who it is. It is Tony Lynch. I'm the host of this podcast, and today I'm bringing on my friend. It's been a long overdue conversation. I've been waiting to have her on. She is amazing. She does amazing work as well. So now, before I do bring her up here, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. And if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section. We'll be sure to answer them as we go along. And if this is your first time tuning in, please do me a favor. Head on over to that YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. And now, without further ado, I'm going to bring up my guest, my friend, and we're going to get into this conversation. So you guys help me welcome my friend Heidi. Heidi, how you doing, my friend?
I'm amazing. It is so good to see you, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. And thank you for being on. It's such an honor to get you on now.
It's an honor to be here.
I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. Now, before we get started, tell people who you are, where you're from, and about the work that you do.
Awesome. My name is Heidi Dunstan. I am based in Canada and in the summer. And when the weather gets way too cold, I hang out in Mexico. And I don't come back until the weather smartens up. And I am a certified grief educator. I became a certified grief educator after I lost my husband unexpectedly in 2018. And I learned from other widows as well as my own journey that a lot of times the people that we care about most don't know how to hold space for us and support us. And so I started learning about why does it hurt so much, and why is it so hard? And so I really created work around what to say and not say to somebody who's grieving, so that we don't lose the legacies of those we've lost. Because so many of us that go through grief end up feeling like we don't have a safe place to talk about our people. And I don't want to lose our legacies. I don't want to lose my husband's legacy. I want to carry that on. Right. And I want to be able to see other people's legacies get carried on as well.
I love that you do that, because I think that is important, that people understand how to hold space with us, right? Because it is hard enough, as you said, as you mentioned, it is hard enough for us to be able to speak about what's going on, or let alone tell people that it's okay to mention their names. It's okay to share memories with us and things like that. Don't be afraid that we may cry. Yes, this is one of the things that we're going to do, because it is part of us, right?
Yes.
But just as it is part of us, it is part of you. And we want others to feel comfortable, right? Now, I've been asked this question so many times, and there's a bunch of different variations that I can always come up. How would you approach someone that was struggling with having that conversation with someone who was grieving?
So a couple different things. Time matters, and how you know the person matters. So typically, if you know the person and you know that they've just experienced a loss and it's recent, our typical way of saying to how we deal with it is we say, "Hey, I'm sorry for your loss," or "My condolences." Right. I don't love "I'm sorry for your loss" unless you killed my person.
Yeah.
Right. I want to acknowledge the pain that you're in. I want to say, "Hey, I see this hurts, and this person to you is significant, and it's allowed to hurt. And my heart goes out to you." And I'll keep you in prayers. That may not align for everybody, but and then I will also say, "Is there something I can do to support you right now?" Okay. Which is a way different statement than "Call me if you need me."
This is very true, because we never pick up the phone anyway, right? It is so hard for us
to know what we need.
Well, and the hardest part about it is that I don't know why the expectation for us to pick up the phone and call you is there, right? Especially if you're on the other side and you know that I'm hurting, that I'm going probably through the worst thing I've ever gone through, in my life. So, and I've always pondered this, but I'll also pivot in conversations with people and let them know that, hey, no, sometimes it's okay for you to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to call me.
Yeah, and you know what? I also play the devil's advocate from the people's perspective. Is a lot of us grievers sit and complain about
Mm,
people don't call us and how we needed them. Well, I can tell you, your person died, your finger just didn't break. You can dial their number just as easily. And so
right,
if you
right,
can complain that people aren't calling you, please know that you need to be accountable to pick up the phone. Now, if they're not going to take your call, that's a different story. But
right.
don't, right, it does not serve you as a griever to talk about all the people who don't call you, right? Be
Right.
accountable to that. Like, and I get we're not at our best, but if we can complain, we can also find a solution, right?
It's very true. It's very true.
So be accountable to that. But as people who are trying to support the people that we care about that are going through a significant loss, I encourage you to say, is there something I can do to support you today?
Hmm.
Or offer, hey, I'm driving up my kids to school. Would it help if I picked up your kids too? Or I'm going to the grocery store. What groceries can I pick up for you today? Do you need anything? That's different than call me if you need me. That's
Right.
giving them hey, these are the things you can ask me to help you with, right? I
Yeah.
had a neighbor who, and it doesn't need to be big. A lot of us think it needs to be huge. My one neighbor was like, I lived in a townhouse, and so we had a communal collection for garbage. And I mean, I had lots of people stay with me for the first month after Mike passed. And my neighbor was like, just leave the garbage on the doorstep, and when we walk by, we'll pick it up. So that I didn't have to show whoever was staying with me where to take the garbage.
Right.
It doesn't need to be big, but I can tell you, I'm almost 6 years out, and that is still memorable for me.
Mm.
They were like, hey, this is what we can do.
Right. And I think that's the part of it that people don't understand. It's the little things. I made it a point, now being in this field for a little bit now. I made it. I used to. Well, I still make it a point. If I know someone who just lost someone, I don't ask questions anymore. I don't say, I don't pick up the phone and call you, right? What I do is that, well, I do, but I do it in a different way. I'm already at the store. I'm already at the grocery store. I'm already picking up laundry detergent. I'm already picking up those essential things, and I'm heading to your house, right? And by the time I get to the house, I've already stopped at probably Wendy's or something like that to pick you up some food because I'm pretty sure you haven't eaten. And this, I go off of personal experience, right? Even if you aren't hungry, I'm already at your doorstep. So when I'm already calling you or knocking at the door, you're like, who is knocking at the door? Don't worry about it. Come open up the door,
Yeah.
right? And so when you open up the door, I'm like, hey, here's some food. Go sit down. I'm already looking around your house, right? I'm not asking too many heavy questions on you.
Because you
And
know what the big question is?
uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
How did they die? What was the cause of death?
Oh my God. You know, that is I don't know if people understand this or not, but when they say things like that, it actually does, it starts to rip at that wound a little
Well, the way I relate it to people,
bit.
so for those of you that you're like, I always want to know, I always say you want to know, but that doesn't really serve the person.
Mhm.
And if the person was alive during 9/11, I say, where were you at 9/11 when 9/11 happened? When you first heard about it? What were you wearing? What did you have for breakfast that morning? I ask them specific questions and they can remember.
Mhm.
The way that their person died is etched in that person's being,
Right.
and it is hard. And you don't need to know. You might want to know, but you don't need to know. And if by chance you know the person who has passed, instead of saying, what was the cause of death or how did they die, say, may I ask what happened? Ask for permission to ask. That's a different statement. Because I can tell you, I don't look like a widow. My husband died the day before my 40th birthday. And I get asked all the time, like, are you single? Are you married? Are you divorced? No, I'm widowed. You don't look like a widow. How'd he die? And that's from an Uber driver. He doesn't need to know.
Right.
But the world of like CSI and law and orders, we've become desensitized to the fact that cause of death should be known. And it is not. It is not information you need to know. And so let the person tell you if they feel up to it or they feel they want to share it with you.
I totally agree with that. Now I want to get into more of your journey, right?
Yeah.
Who was Heidi before all of this, right? Because if you're anything like you are now, I know you're amazing now. So I can only imagine you back then,
Wow,
you know,
kind.
before everything, and with your intellect, you know, it's just like, tell us who you were before then,
You know,
before your person.
I was probably the same woman.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to learn how to love somebody who I cherish in a very different way.
Yeah.
And so it comes with a deeper level of compassion, a very deeper level of empathy for those that have lost a spouse or those that have lost somebody they cherish. And it's come with a deeper level of understanding grief and understanding that grief isn't a bad thing. And I actually define grief as love.
Yeah.
And when you witness deep grief, you're witnessing deep love. And it wouldn't hurt if they didn't love their person. And so I take it when somebody shares part of their grief journey with me or shares the legacy of somebody that they cherish, I see it as an honor, not a burden.
Mm-hmm.
I am so grateful that they trusted me. And I hope others can hear that. I often tell people the hard part with grief is judgment. Judgment is what stops connection and grief. And the reason why we judge and why we judge ourselves is, one, we don't know much about grief. We don't talk about it because heaven forbid we actually think about the fact that we might die, and that the people around us will die. But on top of that, grief is as individuals your fingerprint. And how you move through grief is how you will move through grief, period. How I move through grief could look completely different, and neither one of them are wrong. And so if you can look at somebody who's grieving and just love them exactly where they're at with zero judgment or zero expectations of what they should be doing, you know, you are able to hold space for them. You can't fix them. And I think that's the hard part is, as we live in a world that doesn't hold space for pain very well, and we want to try to fix people. Well, you can't bring their person back from the dead. And so allow them the space to move through the emotions that they deserve to move through.
I totally agree. I'm making sure people know where to find us today.
Yeah.
And things like that. And that is truly amazing. Now, I would like to elaborate, like for you to elaborate just a little bit when you say that you had to love someone in a different capacity from being on a different level of compassion, right? That you've had for them, things like that. Because I don't think a lot of people really truly understand what that means, right? I like me personally, I understand my lane. So I, you know, there's some things that I won't get off into and things like that because, for one, you know, unless I've experienced it, then, you know, I leave that to those who know better than me, right? And I'm very blunt about that one. Like, no, I know somebody who is better than that, better at having that conversation than me. So, elaborate on that just for a little bit. What does that mean?
So, I give the example. Have you watched America's Got Talent before, Tony?
I have.
Okay, so I want you to think about when the contestants get the golden buzzer. Not all of them get it, but like 4 or 5 of them in the whole season get a golden buzzer. When they get the golden buzzer, do they celebrate the same?
No.
No.
Okay.
No, they don't. Some of them run around the stage in excitement. Other ones collapse to their knees, and some of them get really emotional and cry. Some of them you can see are having a moment with their creator, and some of them just shake and tremble and jump up and down. And as viewers, we never judge how they move through that excitement and how they move through that joy. But we do judge how people move through pain.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Imagine if when you saw somebody in pain, you treated them the same way you watch those people get the golden buzzer, that you sat with them and were like, hey, I see this is hard. Or, wow, I really miss so-and-so too. They made the best cinnamon buns. And I love the music that they listened to. And you could just sit with them and be with them, whether you knew the person who passed or not. Right? And just be with them and not try to fix it, not tell them that they're crying too much, not tell them that they gotta suck it up and get over it, because we've all heard that phrase before, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And how about we just say, hey, I see this is hard. I mean, recently I saw a friend of mine, and she lost her husband 12 years ago, but it was recently her birthday. And it's been 12 years, and she was having a hard day because she is now older than her husband. Because after 12 years, and she's like, it doesn't make sense. I was never supposed to be older than him. I'm not supposed to fix that. She's allowed to hurt. She's allowed to feel. She's allowed to feel sad. That's valid. And so it can be imagine how she would feel. It would be like, you still think about that guy? You're not over it yet? Are you stuck in your grief? Which is what most grievers hear, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? What if we left those statements out of our vocabulary and just sat and said, could you tell me your husband's name? Or I'd love to hear about them. I recently was on a flight where I had just finished working crazy amount of hours, and I thought I was going to have a little nap on the plane. I'm not going to lie. And a gentleman came and sat down beside me, and he introduced himself, and he's like, hi, I'm Roger. And he was quite excited. And I was like, oh, we're not sleeping on this flight. And Roger and I had the best conversation.
Yeah.
Now, he was a retired hospital pharmacist, so he was a great listener, and he asked really good questions. But in the course of that 4-hour flight, he asked about my husband. He asked his name. He asked things that I loved about him. He asked some of my favorite memories. And at the end of that flight, him and I became friends. I still hang out with him and his wife. At the end of that flight, he gave me the best compliment, which was, I wish I met your Mike.
That's amazing.
Right? It wasn't, well, I can't believe you're not over it yet, or haven't you found another guy yet? You're young, you should have love again. Like, it was, he just let me be who I was, and I got to hear his story, and there was no judgment, and it allowed for connection. And when you think about the fact that grief is love, love is meant to be done with connection. And connection can't happen when we judge. Plain and simple. It's grief's kryptonite.
Yeah. My question would be, when was your turning point? When did you, after your life changed, when was your turning point when you said, you know what, I'm going to use this to help others?
So when I move through emotionally hard stuff, the way I process is I tend to need information. Now, the hard part for me is I'm usually a pretty avid reader. And if anybody's gone through a significant loss, reading can be very difficult because your brain kind of changes. And so I had to connect through audiobooks. And I would listen to audiobooks from other widows who have gone through this and have been sharing their story. And as I started to dive into that kind of information, and then the other gift that was given to me was Facebook groups about widows, and joining Facebook groups and seeing other people go through the same hurts as me. And it wasn't about our spouse. It was about the people around us. I was like, this has to change. And it's not going to change if we continue to do what we've always done. It's not working. I'm sorry for your loss, sending somebody flowers and a card and a casserole, and that's all we do. Maybe we go to a service. That's all we do. That's not working. And so I really was like, we got to change the narrative on this. And David Kessler came out with his first Certified Grief Education course.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and I think I had listened to his book, Finding Meaning, which is what, like, he studied under Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Yeah.
And he created like the 6th stage, which was finding meaning. And that's part of carrying on somebody's legacy and finding those meanings and the loves that we have in our life that aren't physically with us anymore. Right. And so I was like, we got to just start talking about grief and talking about what to say and what not to say. Because you and I both know, before we went through a loss, we stuck our foot in our mouth once in a while.
Oh yeah, not knowing what to say. You know, I wasn't the best, right? You know, I really wasn't. Awkward. Because you know, although I had experienced losses and things like that, I didn't know necessarily how to deal with it, because I was always taught, you know, you man up, you keep moving forward. But of course, you know, there was another side to it as well that people didn't know, was that, you know, being in the gangs and things like that, you didn't really grieve, right? You looked at what was going on and you said, you know what, it's time to go wrong. So, you know, to even process something like that, to even have the emotions, and the way that I was always taught was that emotions will get you killed. If your enemy sees you out there crying, he's going to think that you're weak. And that's what you don't want. Because if he feels that you're weak, that means that anybody that walks up behind him, they're going to think the same thing. You're going to find yourself in a world of where you're not going to be able to survive the way that you think that you are. And so you had to learn how to move. You had to learn how to stuff it down, right?
And you know what it typically looks like when you stuff it down?
Oh yeah. Well, I found out later on.
It looks like anger.
Right. And that's, you know, and that's where I educate people on how men grieve, right? You know, because they always like the biggest thing that I always get from people. He's always angry. He never lets anybody in. Now I take that and I dissect all of those different things, and I lay out the variables for people. And I often say, you know, have you ever seen him cry? Oh no, I always see him doing X, Y, and Z. And I go, okay, it's always the first one that they always look past, perception versus reality. And I go, what if I told you you are watching him cry? They go, what do you mean? I said, men don't shed tears because we try to protect the thing that keeps you safe, which is our masculinity. We're providers and protectors. So the way that we cry is through anger, because that's the way that we've always been taught. When we suppress, we become angry. So it becomes a different language that most people don't pay attention to. And so, but they people are quick to say there's something wrong with them and things like that. Heidi, you already know, right? You and
I always say that anger is one letter short of danger.
There you go. And it's just that thin of a line.
You stay stuck in anger. Mm-hmm. It's dangerous. And I always tell people anger is, you know how you can go and get those lottery tickets where you scratch off the silver stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Anger is always the silver stuff. There's always an underlying emotion underneath it. And oftentimes it's grief.
Yeah.
And sadness.
But people never want to look at that aspect of it, though, because especially if, and don't get me wrong, you know, there is so much more that goes along with it. Whereas if people took the time to calm down and breathe and actually was in that space with those individuals, it tells a different story from the other side. Perception versus reality. Not everything you see is the truth, right? Learn to listen before you speak. And sometimes you don't have to speak. right? And so that can go so many different ways,
Mhm.
so many different ways. But I'm also mindful when I tell them, like, hey, be careful how you approach this situation, because you have to understand the world that most men we live in has changed, and so therefore we revert back to the thing that kept us safe in the beginning, which was survival, right? And you have to understand that if you've been with a person, you understand that. Or if you even if have men in your family and things like that, look at the way that they carry themselves,
Well,
right?
and you think about a woman
Yeah,
who
I
anger is
don't
her
leave
coping
out,
mechanism,
yeah. Look. I don't leave out of female counterparts at all.
yeah,
No, I won't do that.
right? Like a
Because,
woman who moves into anger often just gets labeled nasty words
well, yeah, well,
because
yeah.
she's not compassionate, she's not emotional, she's not
Mhm.
feeling, and they get misunderstood.
Well,
And
yeah.
then they get left alone, and then they're stuck to move through their grief in isolation.
Yes. Yes. Rachel, yes, I am back with the webcam. I had to do some technical stuff with it. It finally came back today. But if you guys have any questions for Heidi today, please put them in the comment section and enjoy the conversation that we're having. Okay. And it's great to see you again as well. I am up and about and walking around and everything. And now we often talk about a lot of do's and don'ts, right?
We
Uh,
do.
let's get into the meat of it. Let's talk about some of the things that you don't want to do with someone or say to someone who is grieving, right?
Any sentence that starts with
Mm,
at
mm,
least they're not suffering anymore.
mm.
The person right in front of you may be suffering. So the at least minimizes them. At least you can get another dog. Sounds even worse when you say at least you can have another child.
No, man.
Or at least you're young, you can find love again. Because it's on a switch and the person died and you just turned it off. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
So any kind of statement with at least, just take it right out of your vocabulary. Um, and know that even if somebody did suffer, I had a very good friend of mine, her husband had Lou Gehrig's disease. He did suffer. It wasn't until she said it that we could talk about that. It wasn't until she said to me, I'm so glad he doesn't have to suffer anymore, that it was okay to lean into that conversation. But
Right.
it is not my place to say, at least he's not suffering anymore. Right. And even, they're with God now. Even the most devout people of faith, I wait until they talk about where they're at with faith, because death can make you question your relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And you can all of a sudden, you could be two people of the same church and you know them very well, and all of a sudden they've lost somebody by suicide or by an overdose. And that person might be pretty mad at God. And it's okay to just say, hey, you know what, I just want to be with you. And let them talk about where they're at with faith. I also encourage you, and we talked about this earlier, don't talk about cause of death. Let them talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Also, the one thing is, don't ask, how are you? Because how are you in our society? The answer is supposed to be good, fine, or okay. And somebody who's grieving is none of those.
Right.
And so ask, how's today? You been sleeping much? How's your heart? I had a friend of mine, I lost 30 pounds the first 3 months that after Mike died. And everybody talked about how good I looked. Because, Tony, I got a few extra pounds. It wasn't a bad thing that I lost it. But I had one friend who said, have you lost all that weight because you're not eating?
Yeah.
And I was like, I hate eating by myself. Or I'm so forgetful that I can't cook more than one thing on the stove at one time because I burn everything. And she was like, I'd like you to come over for dinner one night and bring some to-go containers and spend the night. We're going to do like a movie and popcorn and desserts and a big dinner. And I'm going to send you home. You're going to have breakfast with us in the morning. And then I'll send you home with leftovers that you can just reheat. But she made it so I didn't have to eat by myself for a day. She didn't do it with judgment. She loved me exactly where I was at. Right? And it wasn't, I didn't have to solve that problem. She just was like, this is what I'd like to do. And so those are important things to just show up, and know that grief lasts way longer than our cultural norms. For us, it's like, somebody dies and within usually 2 weeks, sometimes 3, you have a service. And then you reach out for a week or 2, and then you're back to your life. But I can tell you that grief is hard for a long time. And it can be a couple of, for me, I've started to feel a shift at about 18 months. Okay. But I can tell you, I really appreciate it when somebody reaches out to me. I call it the day that Mike died. I call it his wing anniversary. It's the day he got his wings, because that was that was important to him. But somebody will reach out and say, "Hey, I know today is the day that you lost Mike, the anniversary of losing Mike, and I wanted to send you a hug." And 6 years post loss, I don't get a lot of those comments anymore. But I don't. You know what? I put those anniversaries in my calendar, and I just reach out to the people I care about, and just say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you. You're important to me." And just show up. And it doesn't matter if it was a year or 12 years from now. Showing up and thinking about that person. Hey, you know what? I know this is the first year that you've been. It's Mother's Day without your mom. I want you to know I'm thinking about you.
Yeah.
We can show up in those ways, and we can use technology to do that. Social media is great that way. Our calendars, just putting a reoccurring meeting in your calendar. I did that recently in the summertime. A friend of mine, it was the anniversary of his wife's passing, and I just reached out, and he was like, "Thanks." He's like, "You're the only person that's reached out." And I was like, "Well, I don't want you to be alone. I want you to know you're in my thoughts." And it doesn't need to be hard. It doesn't need to be deep. It doesn't need to be, it can be as simple as, "I'm thinking about you today. Sending you a hug." We tend to overthink it and know that the words matter.
In so many different ways, right? And I'm still learning language when it comes down to that, right? Because as a student of grief, the one beautiful part about it is that it's constantly teaching me. It's constantly correcting me about certain things, right? And validating in a lot of other areas as well. Like, okay, I have this down packed over here, and I just need to add this into it so I understand how to have a conversation with someone, right?
I call it working our grief muscle.
Right, working that grief muscle, right? That gift is something different. It is a beautiful gift if you allow it to begin to build and manifest itself into the world. It can be this beautiful guiding light, and you can see beyond the sorrow. You can see beyond the anxiety and the depression, and you can begin to write it a little bit, right? And allow it to add to it. Those things that you may be curious about. A lot of people have heard me say this before, and I'm going to repeat it because I think it's the best way that I can always describe it from my point of view, right? Grief to me is like a canvas that you get to paint. It's like a paint by number for me, right? No matter what it looks like in the beginning, it's just a mixture of colors. That's all. Because grief is messy, right? So this is how I use the definition. Grief is messy. So this is colors that you see. You see all the blues, the greens, the reds, the whites, the grays, all of these different things just mixed in together. You begin to heal. The colors begin to move. Some of them become a little bit more dull. Some become a little bit more bright. Some tend to blend with itself.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, you have a picture.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and for me, right? For me, the picture was the picture of my family, and I understood it made sense to me. Now, every time it changes every time because now that I have this picture, I know that this is why I do what I do. It becomes my purpose to make sure that their legacy lives on through the work that I do, and how I treat people. And then the second one is an expression of your emotions, right? And it's the same thing as you begin to do it. It may not make sense in the beginning, but as you go, you can begin to move things around, and you can paint. It becomes this beautiful thing that you yourself can identify. And I tell people this is why grief is such an individual thing, because it's how you perceive it, not how others want you to perceive it, because their opinions don't really matter. You get to paint this picture as beautiful as you would like it to be.
And
But
it changes.
yes, it changes
Like
every
a
time.
lot of people ask me, does grief get easier? And I say it gets different. I
Ah,
don't say easier. I say it gets different. It changes. And there are days that are easier. There are days that are not. So I always say it gets different because when you have a bad day or a hard day or a sad day, um, that's when people, like a lot of people think that, they're heard about the stages of grief. And we live in this world that we think that stage means one and done.
mm.
And it isn't until you've been through grief that you realize that it's a hot mess.
Look, you will. Those out there are probably laughing right now because they understand where that comes from. You're absolutely right. It is a hot mess, and man, until you can learn how to dance the waltz with it, you know, it's going to trip you up. It's going to make you question everything about your reality.
Well, and that's why I often say it's so important to grieve with grace.
Yeah.
Grieve with grace with yourself and grieve with grace with others. Because a lot of people think that grief is just emotional, but it's not. It changes every fiber of your being. It
Hmm.
changes my brain. It changed how I slept. It changed how I ate. It changed every fiber of my being. I felt like there was a weight on my chest for probably 12 months minimum. No, probably a little longer, probably about 14 months,
Okay.
right? And it felt like I was having a heart attack. And it was physical. Like I knew that like there was nothing, right? And then you add something like like I had PTSD after because I did CPR on my husband. And so you add other components to it and it's significant. And you don't know what somebody is going through. You don't know what they're dealing with other family because everybody gets hunky-dory along after somebody dies. No, people are, I want this, and what about that, and why are we including this, and it gets really complicated. And so grace is so important for yourself and when you're seeing and witnessing somebody go through grief.
Now, is it? I've seen both sides of it, but I want to get your personal experience. Is it hard to let people in after you lose a significant part of yourself?
um I think it's about making sure you have the right people around you. I often tell people go and get grief counseling, not just a therapist. Go and get somebody who's trained in grief. And because it is different. I went and saw a therapist, and after about 3 visits, she was like, "You're doing everything right. I can't help you." And it was like, these are 4 walls that I can be who I need to be.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, you're not the right person for me. But when I saw a grief counselor who was like, when I witness deep grief, it's because I'm witnessing deep love. And it's an honor to watch you cry because I see how much you love your husband. That's a very different situation than you're doing everything right. Because let me tell you, grief doesn't come with a manual.
No.
And even if you've gone through it more than once, if you've lost a spouse and then you've lost a child and then you've lost a pet, all those griefs can look very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get to choose. And Tony, you know, by day I'm an event manager.
Yeah.
I'm really good at planning stuff. I'm really good at scheduling it. I wasn't allowed to schedule my grief. I wasn't like, hey, I got 2 hours. I'm going to grieve here. It doesn't work like that. You know, I go to the grocery store and walk by the milk aisle and realize I didn't have to buy milk, and it would take me to my knees. And guess what? That's what it's like for people. They don't know. They could walk by somebody and smell somebody's cologne or perfume, and boom, grief hits. Or a certain song plays, or whatever that thing that activates their grief. I don't like using the word trigger because it sounds so negative. All it is them remembering their person. And when it's a recent loss or when it's an unexpected activator, it can mean that they're sad. But it can also be like, hey, I'm so glad I got to smell that. You know, I miss that smell. Right? We learn to find ways to honor our people.
Yes, we
and
do.
Acknowledge them, right?
You know, I didn't understand that when I first got in. Like I said, you know, when I first got in, I was so green behind the ears, but I knew that this was something that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to connect with other men. I really didn't. I didn't understand the fullness of how everything worked itself out. Right, I didn't see any of this, the other stuff coming. Like, you know, and we'll get into that. You know, we'll get into that. Rachel just put in a question up here. I want to put that up here, and I'm going to address it to you. What should one do when they are grieving, but they feel like they can express it only around some specific people who they are in conflict with too, so they can't reach out?
Get other support. So oftentimes going into a social media group with people that are going through that like the same kind of significant loss, you know, so it might be a sibling loss or a pet loss group, or go into places where it can be safe for you. And lots of those groups now, especially on social media and Facebook and stuff, they allow you to post anonymously, or go and get a grief coach or a grief therapist, or have a friend that'd be like, hey, I just need a safe place that isn't around all this conflict. Because you have to take care of you. And I always let people know, like, when you're grieving and another family, there's conflict with another family member, you need to remember that they're in conflict, that they're grieving as well. And the two of you may be grieving differently.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of parents, when they lose a child, divorce happens. There's a high rate of divorce. It's because they're grieving differently. And they're judging each other, and they can't show up and hold space for each other because their pain is too big. Right? David Kessler said it, and he's lost a child, was, you know, when you lose a parent, you're an orphan. When you lose a spouse, you're a widower, but there is no pain. There is no word to describe the loss of a child.
You know, I'm careful about that because I don't want to take away from someone else's loss, right? And I can speak to all of those. The only one I can't speak to is the loss of a spouse. And I've been doing everything I can not to complete that holy trinity, right? Because I don't know if my heart can take too much more of that. But I've lost them. You know, I am an orphan in the world. Both my parents are gone. I've lost a sibling, right? I've lost a child. I've lost grandparents, my aunties. I've lost uncles. I've lost numerous of friends. But most of the hardest loss I would say would be losing myself in all of this, because I've had to redefine myself in every aspect of it. And, you know, and had to I had to go back and find who I was in this new world that I'm living in. now. And so there's a bunch of different things that compounds inside of that. So I'm very careful because I realize that it may what one relationship or one loss may feel to me, the loss that that person has experienced would feel the same, right? So I want to respect that.
Comparing is dangerous.
Right, right, and that's why I said I
Yeah,
always want to respect that and
yeah.
not go, well,
And
you
that
know,
statement isn't a comparing statement.
right, right. No, no,
Know that.
I'm,
Like,
I'm very careful
yeah, yeah.
about that because when someone is grieving, it can feel that way.
Well, because guess what? The
Mm,
way that we try to relate to grief is we turn
mhm,
around and be like, hey, I understand grief. I went through divorce, or I
right,
totally get grief. My grandma died,
right,
or I'm still really sad that my goldfish died. And, you're like hours post loss, and you're just like, what am I supposed to do with all this?
right.
Right. And it does in those moments feel like comparison.
Yeah,
That is not an appropriate time or place to talk about that. Right.
right. And
And
that's what I mean by that. Um, yeah, that's exactly what I mean by that. Like, so I always say, look, if you cannot be comfortable grieving around the people that you're with, then change the people that you're with. Right? It's okay. It is okay to let people go and be who they are. What is not okay is for you to keep suppressing what you're going through. Because the last thing that you want to find, well, the last place that you want to find yourself is in a deep, dark place where you're constantly blaming yourself or questioning the world that you live in, right? And you feel as if you're alone. There's, as Heidi said, they're therapists, they're grief therapists. Now, there's a difference between getting a therapist and then having someone who specializes in grief, right? So be very specific about what you're needing. And it's okay, like even if you're going to groups and everything, if you find a group that don't work for you, it's okay.
find a different group.
Right? You know what I'm saying? It's really just that simple. You don't
Yeah.
have to be committed to one place or another, but surround yourself with people who are good for you first and foremost.
And know that as your grief changes, the groups you're around might change as well.
Yeah.
Right. I know that when I joined I joined about 10 widow groups when early on. And some of them were glass half empty kind of people.
Hmm.
And other ones I could see that they were it was nice because there were people that were early in loss and then also people that were further along. And there was times that the people that were further along would talk about things like taking off wedding bands or packing up closets and things like that. And I had to keep my judgment in check because I was like, who are you to tell me? But I was like, they're in a different place than me. And I would say that that's probably one of the biggest lessons I learned in grief is the fact that I don't get to judge if I don't want to be judged.
Mm.
Plain and
That,
simple.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Because I know now on the flip side of it, that judgment can people would take it personal. Right. It's really
Of
easy to take
course.
things personal, right? You know what I'm saying? Like someone could say something to you, um, just out of the kindness of their hearts. And I'm going to speak from a personal experience. And I went off on this guy for the simple fact of he asked me how my day was going. And I thought it was pretty obvious, right? But now I do understand that the way that I probably looked to other people was that I was doing fine. I was still getting up in the morning. I was still hitting the gym. I was still doing all the things that I would normally do and things like that. So I was really good at hiding the hurt, the deep embedded pain. I was really good at not um, saying that, hey, I'm not okay, right? And it's the mask that we all wear, and it becomes evident after a while. And I remember probably 3 months 3 months after my son had passed away, I was still, I was still going to church. I was still, I was still worshiping. I was still, going to men's groups and things like that. But I was quiet. No one really noticed the difference or anything like that. I was quiet. I still participated in things like that. And just so happened one day I was in a very, very strange mood. Right, it was very tricky for me that I didn't know. The guy comes up and goes, "Man, you have an amazing day." And I turned around. I was like, "What do you mean have an amazing day?" I was literally ready to tear this man's head off. Like, how dare you? How dare you? Do you not understand what I've just gone through? What I'm dealing with right now? Do you? I am about to rip your head off and speak to you while speak to your head while your body is convulsing on the floor. Like, don't you ever, right? And it's crazy as it sounds, but as and again, when I say this, I'm speaking from my perspective, but what most men would do, and some women as well, right? So I don't want to take the women out of the equation. I use men because that's where my
That's
lane.
right. Yeah.
Right, that's what I'm good at, and I speak better from that perspective and things like that. Most men become very volatile. We do. We become very volatile. This is the reason why we isolate, right, from other individuals, because it's such a questionable journey that grief is. That if we don't understand it, we have to destroy everything in our path. And I tell people this: look, I've destroyed many, many of people because I didn't understand the path that I was on. And if I'm such a, I was, and I still am. I've learned to control it, but I'm such a battle dog, right? That I refuse to get whooped by anything. And I say that to say this to any man out there listening, or any woman out there that's curious about what the men are going through in your life. When we are in that moment or in that stage of the grieving and things like that, it's dangerous, because this is where the blame starts. This is where we will push you so far away by doing things, right? To I would rather you hate me than be in my space.
Mhm.
And if I can hurt you to a point to where you're willing to stay away from me, I can do that because I want to keep you. Look, I want to keep you safe from me. But also, it is my way of saying I'm done. I'm done with everything in this world. I can no longer protect you. I couldn't protect this individual. And so I this is what I know how to do. And that's why I said me personally, in my path of destruction, I destroyed a lot of people, not intentionally, but for protection. And so I didn't know how to speak. I didn't know how to articulate it to
Well,
individuals.
and the hard part is that we sometimes do that because we anticipate they're going to say stupid things, and they're going to say things that hurt. And
Mhm.
so it's way easier to say something that's going to put them off and make them feel like they stuck their head in their mouth, and make them put their head back in their turtle shell and not talk to you about that stuff.
Right.
Right. And those are the moments that I tell people, those are the moments when you actually do put your foot in your mouth, own it. When you don't know what to say that. I don't know what to say. I'm terrible in these situations, but you're important to me. And I don't have words. Or I did say the wrong thing and I'm sorry. And just lean in. I can tell you, I've talked to many widows who are like, they're walking down the street. They see their good friends walking this on the opposite way, and their friends cross the street and avoid them.
Hmm.
And they're like, my husband died. I'm still alive. I still deserve to be seen. There was 6 of us that hung out. I haven't seen the other 4 since my husband's service. Because I'm a reminder to them that he's gone.
Right.
But when we stop and when we push people away, it's because that's our way of trying to control the fact that they can't hurt us when they're far away.
Exactly. Yes.
Right. And then on the other side of it is, this is how people often will kind of buy out of not leaning in and holding space is, oh, Heidi, you're so strong. Can't believe how strong you are. Oh, Tony, you're so strong. You're still going to the gym and you're still going to church. I took that strong badge off a long time ago, Tony, because I wasn't strong. I was broken. I was hurting. And you are telling me I'm strong because you're afraid to lean in. You're afraid to say, hey, this has got to be hard. And guess what? I wasn't strong. I was courageous. It took courage for me to get up every day and put one foot in front of the other. It took courage to some days step in the shower. It took courage some days to find my keys in the dishwasher or my mail in the freezer because I couldn't remember where I put stuff because my brain went offline.
Yep.
And so acknowledge the courage it takes for them to get through a day. Acknowledge the fact that you maybe don't have any idea what the right words are to say because there aren't right words. And so instead of being silent, know that that silence is deafening to the person who's hurting, and say, I don't know what to say, but you're important to me and I want to show up for you. And I'm here and I can't fix this. And you're allowed to feel how you feel.
I love that you said that. I really do, because it brought up something that really touched me in a deep space. Because when you said that, I was like, ouch. Because I can remember not feeling like I was worth it. Right? I could remember feeling like I wasn't worth your worry. I wasn't worth your thoughts. Right? And so I wouldn't let people get close to me. Like, why would you want to get close to me? Because you're going to try to hurt me. I learned that lesson from the person that I was with at the time. Because I think it was 6 months after my son, and I was getting hit hard. I was getting hit, but I was just going, I just need somebody to talk to. And I thought that this person was going to be a safe space for me. And what ended up happening, she said these words to me. She was like, I don't understand. It's been 6 months. You should be over it. And I stopped at that moment. I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And I got up, packed up all my stuff, and I went home. And that was the last time I ever saw her. But it had reminded me, because I had known this person for probably 8 years, 9 years at that time. And for those words that had come out of her mouth, it just really let me know that I can't trust anyone. No one cares about you, Tony. So for those individuals out there that are going through something like that, yeah, these things do happen. Okay, those words are being said. Things like that is not fair, and it will hurt. Okay,
and it's not done maliciously.
Right, it's not done maliciously. It's because people don't understand.
They don't.
Right. So
we didn't understand it until we went through it.
Exactly. But that's where that term, I always use that term, don't take it personal. Because unless a person has gone through something similar to you, they will never understand the depth of the pain that you're experiencing. Right? So don't take it personal. I did take it personal because this was someone that I cared about deeply. And when that happened, I pretty much shut that part off of me. It was like, I can't allow anyone else to do this to me. But I realized also that it was an invitation to heal. Everything that I had experienced leading up to my mom's passing, and even after, was an invitation to learn and to heal. And then I found myself in a place to where I wanted to serve. And so even in that aspect of service, actually added more healing because I was able to give to someone the things that I didn't have. Right? You as being an event planner, how does that help in your journey of healing?
As an event manager, I mean, one, there's lots of concretes, right? So lots to control. And so that gives me some stability. But I mean, my job as an event planner is the events that I get to run are people that are usually speaking on stage that their talks are fueled from the pain that they've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
They've found passion in it, like you and I have.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's a gift for me because it's given me that purpose back, to be able to take what I was trained to do, what I've done for many years, and love people exactly where they're at. Because I can tell you when somebody's getting ready to go on stage, they're not always at their best. And I've got to find a way to either let them be exactly where they're at or help them change their state. And when that is impossible, and I had one recently, I was just in the UK last week, and I had a lady who it was not possible to change her state. She was pretty worked up. And I was like, okay, then let's go at it a different way. And I just loved her where she was at.
Mm-hmm.
Because guess what? I'm going to treat people the way I want to be treated.
Right.
I'm going to ask questions. Is there something I can do to support you? Right? If she has those words that, hey, Heidi, can you do this instead? Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Right.
But I don't know what's going on in here. And so, you know, sometimes I'll maybe even ask the question of, what's the story you're telling yourself right now? And do you need, I call it the shut the fuck up button. Excuse my language.
I love that.
Right? Like, because sometimes the story we tell ourselves, we just need to hit that shut the F up button.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we all have that itty bitty shitty committee, and it needs to be told to be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I find that nowadays, I'd like to surround myself with like-minded individuals, people that I can speak the language of grief to, because I still find it, even now to this day, I find it fascinating. It is, for me, it is such a place of curiosity. And I'm like a huge kid when I'm in it. I'm just like, I sit there. You ever see the kid that's the kids that are sitting around in a circle and the teacher's reading the stories, the nursery rhymes and things like that, and they're just sitting around all excited and things like that. You know, I'm that, right?
Yeah.
And so, like right now, I imagine myself sitting around with the rest of the kids listening to you, Heidi, right? You know, with my hands on my cheek, like, oh my God, I want to know more, right?
You know,
It is, and to me, that's the beautiful feeling of wonder, and it allows me to think a little bit further and a little bit deeper, a lot further and a lot deeper than just the surface level conversations.
and it's interesting because people come to me. I was at a funeral actually, and a lady came to me and she's like, my friend's mom died and her dog died and she's a mess. Can you fix her? No, your friend is allowed to be a mess.
Yeah.
She's allowed to hurt right now. Those
Yeah.
are significant losses. I always say, like, people think that pets and siblings, I think, are losses that often get way overlooked. And people don't acknowledge, like, you know, if you look at somebody's pet, the way that if they lost a child, you know, I had a cat. She was my baby. I had her since she was 5 weeks old. She died in June. I was a mess. I don't have children, but she was my child. Like, right? And so I always say to people, like, I let people be where they're at. These are significant losses. And I always tell them, I'm not going to fix your friend, but I'm happy to help you learn how to support them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And people get really freaked out. No, I want you to fix my friend. No, your friend's not broken. She's grieving.
Yeah. Yeah, and that I think that's something that people need to understand. And and I've had people correct, try to correct me and things like that. And I often say, look, what I say, don't take it personal. This just comes from my own place of understanding, and I don't ever want to take away from someone else's understanding. But when I work with men, you have to understand the language that I use with them, right? Most men, if you go and say you're broken and things like that, that can be taken quite literal, right? And men, if they believe that they are broken, that they can't fix themselves, well, they destroy themselves,
Mhm.
right? And they'll do it right in front of you. And then the next thing you know, you're reading about how this individual has taken their own life. It's because, and they read the letter. If they left the letter, I was so broken that I didn't know what else to do. So I teach men, I said, look, when you eliminate the word broken out of this journey that you're on, and actually be truthful with yourself, you're hurt. You're deeply hurt. You can begin to open up the doors, um, and find pathways of healing.
Mhm.
Follow that, right? But you have to be very honest with yourself. You can't go, I'm okay 1 minute and then turn around and go out and go buy a fifth of vodka the next. It kind of contradicts what you're going through. And I get it. Look, the alcohol, the drugs are a solution to what you're going through. Not a very good solution, but it's a solution nonetheless. And so when we begin to look at it from that aspect, we begin to go, okay, if this is the solution, let's figure out what a problem is. And then that way we can come back to where we can find different solutions to combat that problem. We find out that most men are dealing with a lot of unresolved trauma, a lot of unresolved, um, like abuse, things like that, grief, things that we weren't ever taught how to deal with. And look, I say that to say this because I've met a lot of women, that are really good friends of mine now, that are dealing with the same things. And I go, if you understand this from your aspect, from your point of view, then why is it hard to look at it from that person's point of view? They're pretty much experiencing the same thing. Sit down and have a conversation. When I make it a point now, um, since I've started this, and I think that when you and I first met was at our second Global Grief Conference. No, the first
It
one.
was the first one.
It was the very first one back in 2022, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that was a fun one. Again, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna do it anyway, right? And
Figure it out as you go along, right?
figure it out as you go along, right? And as much of a mess that it looked like, it turned out to be this beautiful thing. And I enjoyed every bit of it, right? I enjoyed learning about it because I've never done anything like this before. Hell, there was so much going on in the world right at that time because we was in quarantine,
COVID, yeah.
literally in quarantine, right?
Lockdown, yeah.
And I had nobody to tell me no. I just said, hey, I want to do a global grief conference, and this is when I want to do it, and this is how I want it to look, right? And now all the other stuff I had to figure out as it went along. and that's when I first met you. And from that first time, I was like, yeah, I like her. She's spunky. I like her. And we've been rocking ever since then.
So fun,
And
right?
right, and so I asked this question: do you find the act of service to other people to be a significant point or a significant walk in your life when it comes down to healing?
I'm thinking about it because I don't want to discredit the work that I've done for myself.
Right.
So please know that because some people, helping others is a codependency coping mechanism, no different than alcohol, drugs, behavioral addictions, right? And so
Right.
I had to do my work before I could help others. You cannot give from an empty cup. And in fact, your cup needs to be more than full. It needs to be overflowing for you to be able to do this type of work. And I get to hear other people's grief stories, but I tend to focus more on education and awareness and advocacy for grief rather than having to hold space for the stories the way that per se you do. And there are times that I have to step back and not do the education to allow myself to move through the grief. You know, my husband died 2 days after Christmas and the day before my birthday, and his birthday's early in January. I have all of my hard days in a 12-day span.
Right.
That is not a good place for me to be out educating the world. That is a good place for me to be holding space and loving myself where I'm at.
Right.
And so, and I really am cautious about that. I love helping people, but it would have been very easy to move into a helping space so that I didn't allow myself to grieve, and I made sure cognizantly that I did my work first.
Right. Yes. No. And no. Perfect. That was like, because I can relate to that. Right. Because a lot of things that come about from the things that we do come from a place where we have to work on ourselves first. And it's a healthy thing to do, to be able to approach someone with lived experience, lived information, things that we've actually put into play, right? And it's trial and error. We both know this, right? There's some things that may work and some things that may not work, right? I tell people, I was like, if you understood how many times I've gotten flipped upside down and drugged from this thing by grief, it would blow your mind until I figured out what worked for me, right? And what worked for me was allowing myself to sit in the moment of grief whenever it showed up, and sit in the hurricane and begin to pick apart those things that stood out the most to me. Because every time it showed up, there was something else sticking out. So the healing, the one thing that I did understand about the healing process is that I'm always going to be finding things that I needed to heal from in order to become my authentic self. And those things that I need to heal from, I need to be able to sit with it, extract information from it, because knowledge is wisdom, and wisdom is key to helping and serving. And so the work comes, that's where that deep embedded work comes from. Patience and grace. As you say, you grieve with grace, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm taking your term. I'm taking your term, everybody.
You're allowed, yeah. you and I have the same philosophy that there is no competition in this, because every person on this planet needs these skills.
Right. And and look, we could talk forever.
I know we
could definitely we could already go over an hour.
Poor Rachel.
Oh no, look, Rachel has been a huge supporter. She's amazing. As a matter of fact,
I would just feel bad because we could still be here in 3 hours.
Oh yeah, and
you and I,
we could jump off and like, you guys are still going, and jump back on and stuff like that. But no, Rachel's been truly amazing. I met Rachel a couple months ago, a few months ago now. She did the logo behind me. She's actually did the second magazine that we had put out and things like that. So she does amazing work, and she and I just developed this friendship. And she's been amazing. She's actually, since everything's been happening, she's been like, hey, whenever you get ready, just reach out to me, right? So I had to tell her. You see up there, right? She was like, I love your energy, Heidi. I know, right? Heidi's energy is amazing. She goes, I don't mind listening to you for 3 hours. Like I said, Rachel's been truly, truly amazing. And there's just some people that enter into your life that that are true blessings and things like that, right? And she's been one of them. And so what was I going? Oh yeah. I was going to say, throughout this course of learning and growing and developing and being creative and things like that, the people that come around you. This is why I'm a firm believer in surrounding yourself with people who are good for you.
Mhm.
And sometimes you got to go through some bad ones too, right? It's not personal. It's not personal at all. And like I
Well,
said,
it's happening for you, not to you.
it's happening for you, not to you, right? And it's sometimes people don't understand the difference between that because it can feel very personable. It can feel
Well,
like life
in the moment,
in the
it
moment.
feels like it's happening to you.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
isn't until you get to step back and go, oh, I needed to learn that.
But it takes individuals like Heidi to help them understand to step aside and look at the full totality of the picture, right? Of everything that's happening. And then changing the mindset so they understand that it is happening for them. And that it's not personal, right? It is personal to a certain degree, but don't add to it, right? Because you don't have to. Because it's going to be honest with you. It really is. It's going to make you be truthful in how you feel. And that's the beautiful part about it.
The
And
nice part is when you hold space for somebody, you both win.
and you both, oh, I love that. I love that because there's no losers in it. We both win.
No,
You know,
yeah,
you don't have.
because there's connection, right?
Oh my God.
Like when you ask somebody how are you, and they actually tell you that life's hard right now, and they tell you,
Mhm.
and you walk away going, God, I wish I didn't ask.
But I don't know. I'm different. Like it's like if
But
I ask,
when you went in with the intent that they were just going to be like, I'm good, fine, or okay, and then
Mhm.
all of a sudden they give you the life story of everything that's wrong in their life, and you're like, whew. But I
Right,
mean, when you go to hold space for
mm,
somebody,
that,
there's the intent to say, I see you.
and that's what I mean, right? So when you're like, for me, my mission is to always leave people better than what I found, right? And when I genuinely ask you, if I come up and say, Heidi, how are you doing today? You can say good, fine, or indifferent, or anything like that. But when I see you again, I'm gonna go, hey Heidi, how you holding up, my friend? That means I'm opening up the doors. You know that you don't have to hide what's going on with you because I see you, right? And I'm letting you know that I see you. So you may not want to talk about it right now, but I'm gonna let you know that hey, when you get ready,
Yeah.
I got you. I got you, all right? You know what I'm saying? You can pick up the phone and call me anytime. You already know this. And that goes for anybody out there. When people, if you approach people with the intentions of actually wanting to know how they're doing, be prepared. Some people may not tell you, but be prepared for the ones that do, right? And make sure that you have enough within yourself to hold that space with them. And just remember, if you don't, it's okay too, right? It's okay to be like, hey, right now I can't do it, right? It's okay. Be honest with them though. Be honest with them. Don't like I've had people tell me, man, this is way too heavy for me. I'm like, what do you mean too heavy for you? I'm the one going through it, right? And so, I've had people do that as well. I find it funny nowadays, but it is all good. It's definitely all good. And with that being said, Heidi, because I know you probably got a busy day coming up and everything like that. Are you in Canada right now? Or you heading to Mexico?
I am in Canada right now, and next week I'm in Jersey.
Oh,
Mhm.
better not be getting out there, going out there and getting in trouble, and have to come out of there and bail you out of stuff. Okay.
No bail. No bail needed.
Oh my God. Heidi, what's next for you? What do you got coming up?
You know what? I am. You'll see it coming up on my website. I probably in the next 48 hours. I will schedule a complimentary masterclass. It is called How to Invite Somebody and Their Grief to the Holiday Table. It's
Mhm.
something that I try to organize every year because we all have them. And unfortunately, a lot of people pass at Christmas or during the holiday season. And so grief could be a little thick. And so I want people to have some tools on how to hold space for somebody and how to invite them and allow their grief to show up too, so they don't have to armor up to go out for Christmas, or to be able to say, hey, they couldn't get out of bed. How do I show up for them? And so I'll give you some hands-on tools, things that you can do, things that you can say to be able to show people that you care and that they matter, and be able to hold space and allow for connection. So watch for that. It'll be coming up. I'll probably schedule it just after the American Thanksgiving, and probably the end of November. So.
Okay, I'm definitely going to keep an eye out for it. So let me know, and let me know how I can support you in that area as well.
Thank you, my friend.
With that being said, tell people how they can find you.
Check me out. Social medias, Lean Into Grief, or HeidiDunstan.ca or .com, to check out my website. I'm on all socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I haven't ventured to the TikTok world yet. I'm just not that girl, but maybe one day.
I'm still venturing off over there, and I still go over there like, oh, okay, I'm going back over here.
yeah. So yeah, if there's something that's resonated, on my website is all the podcasts that I've guested on. This one will get loaded in the next probably 3 or 4 days. And I just really want to help change the narrative on grief so that we all can grieve with grace together.
I love that. Definitely love that. And before I let you go, if you had any words for the audience out there listening right now, what would you tell them?
Be okay with the fact that it hurts and it's not fixable. Love people where they're at. They're loving their person and trying to learn how to love them in a whole new way. And so give them that grace. Show up for them. The people that showed up for me and other grievers, they're memorable. We remember those moments because we have to let go of the pain at some point. And so the people that showed up and let me cry, that, took my garbage out, that instead of brought flowers, they brought the Costco-sized Kleenex box. I remember those. They're important to me. And be that person for somebody. It will be of value to you in your relationships.
I love that. I definitely love that. For everyone, I want to say thank you guys for tuning in. And if it's your first time tuning in, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button on that YouTube channel. The page is right there.
Down there.
Just down there.
Just down there.
Let's Talk About It podcast on YouTube. Check us out over there. And we're going to be doing some bigger things. We're going to keep everything moving and everything. And hopefully you guys enjoy the conversations that we have. And if you have, and you know someone who can benefit from the conversations that we have. Again, this podcast serves many, many purposes. The people that I interview are people who are active in this field. They're amazing people. You guys already know their story. Reach out to them. Give the support that you need and that you deserve, okay? And just let them know that you've seen them on Tony's podcast, okay? And these individuals are going to take good care of you. And with that being said, an update. So we're still a go for the Global Grief Conference 2025. That coming up April 25th, the 26th, and the 27th. Okay, we got some amazing things coming for you guys. The magazine, it will be coming out. We may be a little late this month and everything. I've had some delays, but we will be. I'm trying to get a little bit more consistent on it. Okay, so bear with me. For those who know, you know, and we're gonna keep bringing the amazing guests to you, the amazing conversations for you. And I'm Tony Lynch. This is going to conclude this episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. You guys are going to see you in the next one. Just remember, you guys see me wearing this shirt all the time now. Well, not just this shirt. I got multiple shirts. Okay. You are enough. All right. You are enough. And there's a saying in the back. If you guys want to get yourself one, I bought mine off the TikTok shop, but you guys can find them. Just type in that you are enough hoodies and T-shirts. They got the sad shirts, which will stay another day. You can get your loved one's name put on it. We are changing how we speak and represent those that are grieving. Okay, we're changing the whole dynamic across the world. And this is what we're here to do. All right. With that being said, you guys, I love you, man. Thank you for your continued support. And hopefully I can keep bringing you guys great content. All right. See you guys in the next episode. Peace.
Thanks, Tony.
You're welcome. Thank you.